Well, boards increasingly face geopolitical and regulatory risk, from antitrust enforcement to national security reviews to trade restrictions. From your experience at the very highest levels of government, what do directors most often misunderstand about how decisions that affect corporations are actually made inside government?
Yeah, it's a different environment. Quite honestly, I think it's important for board directors to understand. Like, for example, there's no central decision-making process necessarily within the federal government. Oftentimes, decisions may get made at the White House, they may get made at Congress, they may get made within agencies, also at the state level, city level, and so there's no one central place that they can look to, quite frankly, in determining, okay, what's the federal government thinking about, what the priorities are, who's going to be making this decision. And so they also, have to understand that the federal government government generally is going to be motivated not by things like return on investment and making a profit like most companies. They're
Yeah.
motivated by other things. The American people? What are they clamoring for? What are the policy priorities for the current administration? And so that's going to drive policy within the federal government. That's also going to drive decisions like investigations and prosecutions, quite honestly. So it's just a different environment. And I think we're seeing sort of more interaction between the government and I think corporate America today. And I think people need to have a better understanding of how the government makes decisions, because how they make decisions and arrive at decisions is going to have a significant impact upon the work of the companies and, of course, the responsibilities of directors of these companies.
Absolutely. And so, speaking of directors, they often learn about regulatory or geopolitical developments only after they've already begun affecting their companies, right? So, are there signals or patterns boards should be watching for that indicate government scrutiny or intervention may be coming?
There's no question about that, in that the priorities of an administration or a government are often telegraphed, not necessarily just by enforcement actions, investigative actions, or by laws passed by Congress. Sometimes it's as simple as listening to what the president says in a speech, looking at legislation that may not be passed but is nonetheless introduced, that indicates some level of interest by someone as with respect to a particular topic. There are a number of, I would call them soft indicators,
Hmm.
where the government is telegraphing something. For example, something as visible as an investigation of a competitor may indicate a renewed interest at the Department of Justice, for example, in a particular type of crime. And so, or a particular type of actions by companies and levels of responsibility, now that the new administration may believe that corporate governance becomes much more important. And so, again, there are many, many ways that if you pay attention, and I think today, because of all of these signals being put out by the government, whether intentionally or unintentionally, I think directors have a responsibility to pay attention. Even now more than ever, you just can't depend upon the laws passed by Congress or laws passed by state legislatures. There are a lot of signals that are given by the government, both local and federal, with respect to priorities for those governments.
And so many directors right now, they feel the relationship between government and business is becoming a little more assertive, let's say. So from industrial policy to national security concerns around technology and supply chains, all of those types of things are in play. So how should boards think about governments and risk oversight in an environment where government influence on business is likely to expand?
Well, I think it is likely to expand, and I think just as boards and companies put into place compliance and infrastructure, they need to do the same thing with respect to government interaction. because that
Mhm.
is going to be, I think, more and more part of the calculus of doing business. And so they need to put in place the infrastructure to deal with potential investigations, to deal with responses, anticipate. I think directors have a far greater duty to anticipate what's coming down the road. And there, as I indicated in a previous answer, there are a lot of ways that governments telegraph what they're interested in. Now, that may change with the next administration. That may change with a change in the laws. That may change with a decision by the courts. But nonetheless, there are things that are out there that I think directors do have an obligation to work with management and just be apprised of things that may affect the bottom line for a company in terms of an investigation or a prosecution.
So when a company suddenly finds itself under government scrutiny, whether from regulators, law enforcement, or congressional investigation, what role should the board play in overseeing management's response? And where should directors lean in? And where should they be careful, maybe not to interfere with the legal process?
Well, once either an informal or formal investigation, but certainly with respect to a formal investigation, I think the role of the board changes dramatically. I think from that point, you have an obligation to try to get an understanding of what has happened without interfering in the investigation. Typically, I've seen what boards do is they identify independent directors and may form a special committee to sort of be in charge of overseeing how that investigation or prosecution moves forward. They may hire a special counsel. There needs to be a clear direction from the board to management and to the other board members. We're not going to interfere in any way with the investigation. We're going to be candid, straightforward, transparent in the investigation. We're not going to do things like punish a whistleblower if in fact the investigation has been prompted by a whistleblower. We're not going to do that. We're going to be open and transparent. I think as a board member also, you're not going to ask questions specifically about details relating to an ongoing investigation by, say, an outside counsel. I think it's important you not have communications with a regulator or law enforcement, informal communications. I think that taints the investigation. Also, when a board director has a conversation with staff about something that may have happened in the company, you make yourself a witness in a future prosecution. You don't want to do that. You want to be very, very careful about the communications. But one thing I cannot overemphasize is the importance of of being honest and transparent. Oftentimes, where companies may end up not getting into trouble for what they've done. Where they get into trouble is how they responded to an
Mm.
investigation and not cooperating fully.